Imagine this. You close your eyes tonight in the safety of your own bedroom, soft pillows, warm blankets, the faint hum of electronics in the background, and when you open them again, you're not at home anymore. Instead, you find yourself in the late 1800s, inside a Victorian house. The air feels colder, heavier. Your breath turns to mist in the chilly morning light. The mattress beneath you is lumpy, the springs poking at your back, stuffed not with memory foam, but with horsehair and straw. Everything around you is unfamiliar. The scent of coal dust, wood smoke, and polish lingering in the air. You've just stepped into a different world. Now, Victorian homes looked beautiful on the outside. Grand facades, elegant furniture, ornate wallpapers, it all gave the impression of wealth, stability, and refinement. But behind that beauty, there were countless dangers that people of the time couldn't even recognize. Some of those very decorations and conveniences that made their homes stylish were, in reality, silent killers. What looked like progress was often a hidden trap. And the truth is, most of us today wouldn't last even 24 hours in one of those houses. That's what tonight's journey is all about. We're going to explore the daily reality of living in a Victorian home, not just the charm, but the struggles, the discomforts, and the unseen hazards. From the moment you wake up to the routines of dressing, eating, and simply moving around the house, we'll uncover why life inside those walls was so much more dangerous than you might expect. But Dan, T, where are you? One T, have to haul buckets of water or lace yourself into a corset. All you need to do is settle into your favorite spot, maybe dim the lights, and let your imagination carry you back in time. Together, we peel back the polished surface of Victorian life and take a closer look at what it really meant to live day to day in a house from that era. And before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to support this channel. If you enjoy exploring the fascinating and sometimes unsettling corners of history, consider giving this video a like and subscribing. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep creating these stories for you. I'm always curious to know where people are tuning in from, so feel free to drop a comment with your location and the time where you are right now. It's amazing to see this little community stretch across the globe with people listening from so many different places. So, take a deep breath, let the modern world fade into the background, and picture yourself stepping across the threshold of a Victorian home. The fire isn't lit yet, the air bites with cold, and somewhere down the hallway you hear the quiet footsteps of a servant preparing to begin the day. The adventure is about to start, and, trust me, by the end of it, you'll be grateful for every modern comfort you have waiting for you in your own home. When you finally rise from that uncomfortable mattress and begin to take in your surroundings, the first thing that strikes you is just how dark the room feels. It's a darkness that seems to cling to the walls and corners, even in the early morning. Because in this era, there are no electric lights to banish the shadows with the simple flick of a switch. Instead, the room depends on the dim glow of a small oil lamp or the weak morning sun fighting its way through heavy drapes, leaving most of the chamber in a kind of perpetual gloom that makes it difficult to tell the difference between dawn and dusk. The walls are covered in richly patterned wallpaper, deep reds, greens, or blues that only make the room feel heavier, pressing inward rather than opening up. And though the designs are meant to convey taste and refinement, they add to the sense of enclosure, as if you are being drawn back into the room rather than freed by it. The cold is the second thing you notice, seeping into your bones almost immediately. For there is no central heating system humming softly in the background, no radiator gently giving off warmth throughout the night. The fire in the grate, if it has been lit at all, has long since died down. And unless a servant comes to rekindle it, you are left with nothing but layers of blankets to fight off the chill. The bedding itself feels heavy, not the lightweight duvets and comforters we enjoy today, but thick woolen covers and rough sheets that trap you rather than comfort you, pressing down with their weight while still managing to let the cold slip in through every gap. On winter nights, frost can gather on the inside of the windows, a thin layer of ice forming delicate patterns on the glass. Beautiful to look at, but a sharp reminder of how little protection there is between you and the bitter air outside. The sounds of the room are also unfamiliar. There is no quiet hum of electricity, no distant rumble of traffic or machines, only the creaking of wooden beams. It's the faint drip of condensation, perhaps the rustling of small creatures in the walls. For someone accustomed to the constant low-level noise of the modern world, the silence feels almost oppressive, as though the house itself is holding its breath. And yet, despite all these discomforts, there is a kind of solemn beauty to the space. The heavy furniture carved from dark wood, the washstand with its porcelain bowl and pitcher, the little writing desk tucked near the window. All of it speaks of another time, another way of living, when comfort was measured differently and the idea of luxury meant something far less forgiving than it does now. As you sit on the edge of the bed, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, you realize that even the simple act of getting ready to face the day in such a bedroom is an ordeal in itself, a test of endurance that begins the moment you open your eyes. And this is only the start of the day, the very first glimpse into what life inside a Victorian house truly felt like, where beauty and hardship walked hand in hand, and where survival often depended not on grand struggles, required to endure the ordinary discomforts of home. The longer you remain seated on the edge of that bed, the more you become aware of just how unfriendly it feels beneath you. For the mattress itself is not the soft, spring-supported cushion you are used to, but a bulky sack stuffed with horsehair, straw, or, if the household is wealthy enough, feathers, each material bringing its own kind of discomfort, each reminding you that rest in this era is something earned through exhaustion, rather than something that comes easily. The horsehair version, though resilient and long-lasting, presses unevenly against your body, prickling in places and leaving gaps in others, so that you are never quite sure whether you are lying flat or being subtly pushed to one side, while the straw-filled kind rustles with every movement, sending a faint but constant whisper into the darkness. And as the straw shifts, it creates ridges and hollows that jab into your back or hips, until you have no choice but to shift again in search of relief. Even the feather mattresses, which at first glance seemed more inviting, quickly revealed their limitations, for the feathers clump together in uneven pockets, sinking too deeply in one spot and puffing up in another, so that your body is trapped in awkward shapes that leave you sore by morning. And unlike modern bedding that can be cleaned and refreshed with relative ease, these mattresses are heavy, cumbersome, and rarely laundered, meaning that after years of use, they carry with them a faint but undeniable mustiness, a reminder of how much life has passed across their surfaces. It is a strange thought, lying there in the half-dark, that what we today consider the simplest of luxuries, a good night as sleep, was once something far more uncertain, subject to the quirks of natural stuffing materials, the limitations of household maintenance, and the sheer endurance of the human body. To lie down on such a bed is not to drift off quickly into comfort, but to embark on a nightly negotiation with the lumps and hollows, the prickle of coarse fibers, the shifting weight of feathers that refuse to stay in place. And as you toss and turn, you realize that waking up tired was, for many Victorians, the normal state of being. There is, of course, a certain romance in the idea of sleeping on something so old-fashioned. The image of feather pillows and four-poster beds framed by heavy curtains. But once you feel the uneven surface beneath your body, you understand that the reality was far harsher, and that the beauty of the room was not matched by the comfort of its rest. And so, as you rise at last and prepare to step away from the bed, you carry with you the ache of a night spent not in restorative slumber, but in uneasy shifting. A reminder that even the most intimate corner of the Victorian home, the bedroom itself, was filled with challenges that modern conveniences have allowed us to forget. Yet this was only the first struggle of the day, for beyond the bed awaited the rituals of washing and dressing, tasks that would prove every bit as demanding as the restless night that had preceded them. As you stand and stretch your weary limbs, shaking off the restless night, another reality of the Victorian bedroom begins to press in on you, one that you cannot escape no matter how you shift or breathe. For the very air itself seems weighted, a dense mixture of coal dust carried up from the household fires, wood smoke drifting in through cracks in the chimney, and the sharp tang of furniture polish lingering from the daily labors of the servants who keep the room in order. It is not the fresh, clean breath of air you might expect when you open a window in the morning, because, in truth, the air outside offers little relief, being just as thick with soot from chimneys, factories, and street lamps, so that whether indoors or out, your lungs are constantly reminded of the air's dependence on coal and open flame. Every inhalation brings with it a faint scratch at the back of your throat. It's not enough to choke you, but enough to remind you of its presence, a subtle irritation that never quite fades. And when the sun filters weakly through the curtains, its rays catch the fine particles drifting lazily in the room, turning invisible dust into a visible haze that sparkles for a moment before settling on every surface. The scent of wood smoke, so nostalgic and even comforting when encountered in the occasional fireplace today, takes on an entirely different character when it is constant, embedding itself into clothing, linens, and hair, until it becomes impossible to distinguish the smell of the house from the smell of yourself. The polish, too, though intended to give a sheen of elegance to the wooden furniture, contributes its own chemical sharpness, mingling with the smoke and dust to form a layered perfume that is equal parts refinement and suffocation. It is strange to realize that what you are breathing is not simply air, but a cocktail of particles and vapors, each one a byproduct of domestic pride and necessity. And though the Victorians themselves had long since grown accustomed to it, your modern lungs protest silently, aching for the crispness of filtered air, for the ease of a deep breath unaccompanied by grit. Yet in the context of the time, this heaviness was not regarded as unusual, for it was everywhere, in parlors, in kitchens, in drawing rooms, and of course in bedrooms where one might hope for peace but rarely find true purity. So, as you move about the chamber, pulling back the drapes and preparing to face the chill of the new day, you are reminded that even the simplest act of breathing was different here, slower, heavier, and far less forgiving. And it is in this moment that the contrast between then and now becomes sharpest, for what we today take for granted as invisible and effortless, the very air around us, was the Victorian home, yet another silent weight pressing down upon the people who lived within its walls, shaping their health, their comfort, and even their endurance of daily life. By the time the first pale light of morning filters through the curtains, you begin to realize that starting the day in a Victorian household was never something one could accomplish alone. For while you are still sitting in the cold shadows of the bedroom, there is movement in the quieter corners of the house, the shuffling footsteps of servants rising long before the family, each already set to the tasks that make the home livable. Somewhere below, a maid bends before the fireplace, coaxing sparks from coal and wood, her fingers blackened by soot as she works quickly to bring life back to the grate, so that the master or mistress might awaken to a faint promise of warmth. The sound of kindling snapping travels faintly through the floorboards, followed by the muffled clang of a coal scuttle being set aside. And with it comes the first hope that the frozen air of the room may soon give way to something more forgiving. It is easy to forget, in the comfort of modern life, how much labor was hidden behind the simplest morning rituals of this era. For hot water was not a luxury that flowed freely from a tap, but something that had to be carried, bucket by heavy bucket, up narrow staircases from the kitchen range far below. Imagine the servant girl, no older than her late teens, steadying herself as she ascends, careful not to spill a drop, her breath quickening under the weight, the steam rising into her face as she balances the porcelain jug meant for the washstand. At a time she reaches the bedroom door, she has already performed a task that would exhaust many of us before breakfast. Yet, this is merely one of a dozen duties expected of her before the household fully wakes. And so the day begins, not with the indulgent ease of slipping into a hot shower, but with a basin filled by hand, the water lukewarm at best by the time it reaches you, and the ritual of washing yourself quickly before the chill steals the heat away. A porcelain pitcher pours into the bowl with a hollow splash, and you dip the cloth, bracing yourself for the shock of coolness that follows. It is a hurried process, practical rather than soothing. It's more about maintaining appearances than genuine refreshment, and all the while the maid waits silently in the background, prepared to gather the used linens, to set aside your garments for dressing, and to vanish almost without notice once her part is complete. In this rhythm of service, the Victorian morning unfolds, every comfort purchased through the quiet endurance of someone else's labor. The fires you fill, the water you touch, even the faint order of the room itself, all are the result of unseen hands moving tirelessly before the household stirs. And as you look into the small mirror above the washstand, your face pale in the dim light, you cannot help but realize that in this time and place, beginning the day was not simply a matter of will, but a matter of hierarchy, of unseen effort layered beneath the surface of ordinary routines, shaping the very way life was lived within these heavy walls. Yet, even as you splash your face and hands with that meager bowl of water, the thought of a proper bath may tempt you. Though in the Victorian world, it is hardly the private, comforting ritual you imagine from modern life. To request a bath is to set in motion a small production, one that calls on several servants, each with their own part to play in preparing what to you is a fleeting indulgence. Buckets of steaming water must be carried up from the range in the kitchen, not once or twice, but many times, the girls staggering under the weight, their arms aching as they pour the precious heat into a heavy tin or copper tub set before the fireplace in your room. The process alone can take an hour, and by the time the final bucket is delivered, the first may already have cooled, leaving you with water that is never quite the same temperature throughout. And then comes the matter of privacy, or rather, the absence of it. In an age where class and propriety dictate every detail of daily life, it is not considered unusual for a maid to remain in the room, standing quietly as you undress, ready to fetch soap, to rinse garments, or to bring another jug of water should you require it. The very notion of bathing is bound not only to cleanliness, but to display, and the act itself is caught between intimacy and performance. To our modern sensibilities, the idea of being observed at such a vulnerable moment feels suffocating, even unthinkable. Yet, for a lady of the house, this was simply the natural order of things. The tub itself, though functional, is hardly the deep porcelain sanctuary you might be accustomed to. Instead, it is shallow and metallic, its edges pressing uncomfortably against your back, its surface cooling far too quickly despite the efforts of the fire. Soap, harsh and often laced with lye, stings against the skin, leaving it raw rather than refreshed. And the steam rising into the air does little to mask the lingering smell of coal smoke and polish that fills every corner of the house. A bath in this setting is not so much an escape as an obligation, a ritual of status as much as of hygiene, and one undertaken sparingly, perhaps once a week at best, for the sheer cost of labor and effort involved makes it anything but an everyday luxury. And when it is over, when the last bucket of used water has been hauled away, and the servants have retreated with their bowed heads and reddened hands, what remains is not the lingering comfort of warmth or the softness of scented oils, but a faint sense of unease at how exposed you have been, at how much of your supposed privacy is, in truth, dependent on others' silent endurance. It is in these moments you begin to see the hidden architecture of Victorian life, a world where even the most personal acts are never truly your own, but rather shared witness within the rigid boundaries of duty and class. And as you step back from the bath, shivering slightly from the lingering chill despite the effort of layers of clothing, it becomes impossible to ignore the quiet truth of Victorian domestic life. Almost every comfort, every semblance of ease relied entirely on the ceaseless labor of the household staff. Its presence is invisible yet profoundly felt in every corner of the home, from the maid who stirred the fire and carried water, to the housekeeper who ensured that the floors gleamed and the silver shone, to the cook whose hours began long before dawn in a kitchen thick with the scent of smoke and boiling broths. The smooth rhythm of the day depended on their tireless, often thankless work, and without them, the elegant veneer of the home would collapse into chaos in mere hours. You watch as a maid glides quietly across the floor, her hands reddened and raw from repeated contact with harsh soaps and boiling water, carrying a tray laden with porcelain cups and steaming liquid, her posture perfect yet weary, a testament to years of training in the delicate art of serving without drawing attention to herself. She sets the breakfast before you with practiced grace: bread, butter, fruit carefully peeled, and perhaps a small piece of meat, though you notice how she handles it cautiously, aware that in a world without modern refrigeration and food safety laws, even these small offerings carry the risk of unseen hazards. And in her movements, in the near imperceptible rhythm of her work, you begin to sense the invisible structure that underpins the household. Every task, no matter how minor it seems to you, has been orchestrated over decades to maintain the illusion of effortless elegance. It is not merely physical labor that defines their world, but also a kind of constant vigilance, for the servants are expected to anticipate needs before they are spoken aloud, to know the daily routines of each member of the household, to prepare and present everything exactly as required without drawing notice, and to navigate the subtle hierarchies that govern their own place in this tightly ordered universe. One misstep in overheated pot, a mislaid towel, a slightly crooked curtain can ripple outward, altering the flow of the day and reminding everyone of the delicate balance upon which life here depends. And yet, for all their invisible toil, there is an artistry to their labor, a silent choreography that transforms the harsh realities of life without modern conveniences into something that feels almost effortless to those who benefit from it. The bed is made, the fire burns, the breakfast is hot, the air cleared as much as possible of coal, dust, and smoke, the rooms orderly, the wardrobes neatly arranged, of it accomplished by hands that rarely touch the praise they so quietly deserve, hands that work in shadow so that the household itself might shine. In observing them, you realize that the comfort of a Victorian home is not a product of wealth alone, nor of fine materials or elegant design, but of the endurance, skill, and constant attention of those whose names you will never know, whose sweat and quiet resolve form the backbone of every polished surface, every neatly folded garment, every ritual of daily life that you have so far taken for granted. E.t. as you take your first tentative bites of breakfast, eyes flicking toward the carefully arranged fruit and bread, your attention is drawn once more to the walls themselves, the very fabric of the room in which you sit. And it is here that the hidden dangers of Victorian life reveal themselves most vividly. The wallpaper, so vibrant and captivating with its deep emerald patterns and intricate motifs, seems almost to glow in the muted morning light filtering through the curtains, and, at first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a triumph of aesthetic taste, a display of wealth and refinement, meant to impress visitors and elevate the ordinary experience of daily life into something almost theatrical in its beauty. But lurking behind that brilliance, behind the lush swirls of leaves and the delicate symmetry of floral designs, lies a silent and invisible killer: arsenic. The very green pigments that give the wallpaper its hypnotic depth, known as Shields green or Paris green, were prized across the era for their vibrancy, yet they carried within them a chemical legacy that few at the time understood, one that would slowly, insidiously compromise the health of everyone living in the house. As your gaze lingers, you begin to imagine the dust that gathers over weeks, months, and years. Tiny particles of pigment dislodged from the wall and inhaled, settling in the lungs with each breath, invisible, odorless, and relentless. Children playing near the walls, running their fingers along the patterns as if tracing secret maps, are unknowingly brushing against a toxin that can cause nausea, headaches, and, in extreme cases, death. A cruel irony hidden beneath the guise of beauty and domestic refinement. Even the simplest gestures, sitting close to a wall, leaning against it while reading, brushing away a cobweb, becomes fraught with unseen danger, a reminder that in the Victorian home, appearances were not only deceiving, but potentially deadly. And yet, it is not just the wallpaper that carries these silent threats. It is the ethos of the era itself, a time when scientific understanding had not yet caught up to ambition, when the pursuit of aesthetic perfection could easily blind even the most cautious homeowner to the dangers encoded in every decorative choice. You imagine the ladies and gentlemen of the house, oblivious to the invisible particles that swirl around them with every breeze, marveling at the richness of their surroundings, while slowly inhaling a poison that the painted walls dispense as easily as sunlight. Even now, the idea that beauty could mask hazard seems almost unbelievable. And yet, as you breathe the same air, marveling at the craftsmanship, you begin to understand the precarious balance on which Victorian domestic life rested. Every comfort and every luxury carried a hidden cost, paid quietly in the air we inhaled, in the dust that settled, and in the bodies of those who dwelled there day after day. By the time your eyes drift from the walls and back to your breakfast, the meal you eat feels heavier, not from the weight of the food, but from the knowledge of what lies just beyond perception. It is an education in subtle terror, a lesson in how human ingenuity, untempered by caution or complete knowledge, can create environments simultaneously magnificent and perilous, beautiful and lethal. And as you lift your cup, the faint green glow of the wallpaper reflected in the polished surface reminds you that danger can be woven seamlessly into the very fabric of life, hiding behind elegance, awaiting the unwary with patient persistence. Yet the hidden dangers of the Victorian home did not end at the walls, for as you rise from your seat and begin to explore further, your senses are met with a cascade of hazards that were woven into nearly every aspect of domestic life, invisible to the untrained eye, yet persistent in their silent threat. The paint on the walls, furniture, and window frames, though smooth and glossy, often contains lead, a substance now recognized as toxic. Yet, in that era, was prized for its durability and brilliant finish, ensuring that every surface gleamed with the illusion of permanence, while gradually seeping invisible harm into the lives of those who touched it daily. Children playing in these rooms, hands tracing the edges of a chair or smudging the paint with curiosity, or unknowingly absorbing poison, their small bodies vulnerable to the cumulative effects that could affect growth, intellect, and overall health in ways the Victorians could not possibly foresee. And then there are the lights themselves, the gas lamps that punctuate each hallway and parlor with a steady, flickering glow, seemingly charming yet subtly perilous. The gas that fueled these lamps was prone to leaks, and a single spark could set loose fire or even cause an explosion in the confined, wood-laden interiors of the home, leaving entire wings vulnerable to catastrophe. At the same time, the fumes released during normal burning were inhaled constantly, combining with coal dust, smoke, and household chemical odors to form a pervasive, thickened atmosphere that your lungs could never entirely escape. A fog of invisible danger that clung to every breath and lingered on clothing and hair long after you had left the room. Water, 2. The very substance necessary for life and comfort carried its own hidden menace, stored in lined tanks. Often connected to the cisterns that supplied kitchens and bathrooms, the water would slowly absorb the metal, carrying tiny amounts of lead into cups, basins, and cooking pots, subtly poisoning the household over time. You imagine the servants lifting buckets of this water to prepare a bath, their hands splashed with it repeatedly, or the family members, unaware, drinking tea brewed with a liquid that gleamed innocently in the sunlight, but carried with it an invisible threat. To modern eyes, the thought is chilling. A home designed to convey refinement, status, sophistication was simultaneously delivering a slow-acting assault on the health of every inhabitant, an omnipresent paradox of beauty and danger that could not easily be reconciled. As you move cautiously through the dim corridors, hand trailing along the polished banister, your mind races to catalog the hidden killers that line the very fabric of the home, the walls that glow with arsenic, the paint that promises brilliance yet delivers toxicity, the gas lamps that illuminate while threatening to ignite, and the water that sustains while slowly poisoning. Each of these dangers alone might be manageable, but together, in combination with the lumpy beds, the cold air, the smoke, and the endless labor of servants, they create a tapestry of peril woven seamlessly into the everyday experience. A reminder that survival in such a household required both resilience and awareness, and that the beauty of the home often masked the true cost paid by body and breath alike. As you cautiously make your way toward the back of the house, past the warmth of the drawing room and the glow of the fading fire, a damp, earthy scent begins to seep into your senses, signaling that some of the most insidious hazards of Victorian life hide not in the elegance of wallpaper or the brilliance of paint, but in the overlooked, shadowed corners where the household rarely treads. The cellar, cold and dimly lit, hums with the quiet growth of mold and fungi that thrive in the damp air and stagnant corners, creeping along the walls, colonizing wooden beams, and weaving their delicate, ghostly threads across the rough stone floor. The scullery, no less treacherous, despite its essential role in keeping the kitchen clean, offers the perfect breeding ground. Stone sinks and tiled surfaces perpetually wet from constant dishwashing. Wooden counters, darkened from years of repeated scrubbing, and buckets of water left standing too long, all of it providing moisture and nutrients for unseen colonies of spores that float invisibly in the air. Every step you take disturbs tiny clouds of these spores, invisible to the naked eye, yet easily inhaled, and you feel a subtle tickle in your throat, a reminder that these seemingly benign patches of gray, green, and black growth are not just unsightly, but capable of causing respiratory distress, headaches, fatigue, and a host of ailments that the Victorians could only attribute vaguely to bad air or the miasmas of disease. You imagine the servants, stooped over sinks and tubs, scrubbing endlessly, unaware that their labor exposes them hour after hour to these airborne dangers, their lungs silently bearing the weight of a hazard the household itself cannot see. Even the residents of the house, venturing down to retrieve wine or preserved jars, are unwitting participants in this quiet, creeping assault on health, a hazard hidden by shadows and the ordinary necessities of daily life. And yet, there is a strange intimacy to these spaces, tactile connection to the rhythms of domestic life that modern homes have long hidden behind sterile surfaces and climate control. The cool, damp stones, the faint smell of earth and decay. Even the slight chill that rises from the floor remind you that in the Victorian era, life existed in close contact with the natural processes of moisture, rot, and growth, that comfort and peril were often inseparable, and that every corner of the home, no matter how utilitarian, bore its own invisible story of endurance and risk. As you pause near the scullery door, the faint scratch of a broom across the floor echoes in the stillness, and you can almost picture a servant bending low, her face pale under the gaslight, hands raw from constant exposure to soap and water, unknowingly breathing in a cocktail of mold spores that will leave its mark over weeks and years. It is here, in the shadows, beneath the elegant floors and ornate walls, that the fragility of Victorian domestic life becomes most apparent, that the very spaces created to sustain comfort, to support cleanliness and order, are also the places where unseen hazards accumulate silently, patiently, ready to assert themselves upon anyone who spends enough time within these walls. And you realize, perhaps with a shiver, that beauty and danger are intertwined at every level of life in this house. Stepping back into the brighter rooms of the house, your attention inevitably shifts from the hidden dangers of walls, floors, and damp corners to the very garments that define a Victorian life. Garments that at first glance appear elegant, delicate, and refined, yet conceal within their carefully structured layers an equally insidious threat. The corset, that emblem of feminine fashion and social expectation, sits poised in the wardrobe, laced tightly and reinforced with whalebone or steel, promising the desirable silhouette of a narrow waist and an upright posture, but delivering a physical experience that is anything but graceful. As you imagine stepping into one, the laces tightened gradually by careful hands. The pressure against your ribs grows almost immediately, each breath more deliberate than the last, each movement slightly restricted, and the very rhythm of your body subtly altered to fit a shape dictated not by comfort but by aesthetic convention. In this tightly bound garment, the ribs are compressed, the internal organs shifted and contorted in ways that modern medicine tells us can lead to long-term damage. From deformed rib cages to impaired lung function, restricted digestion, and even fainting from the inability to inhale deeply. Sitting down becomes a careful negotiation with the structure pressing against your torso. Standing too long feels like an endurance test, and the faintest cough or sudden movement threatens to reveal the vulnerability imposed by your own attire. Yet, despite the discomfort, the corset is not merely a piece of clothing. It is a symbol, a visual testament to status, propriety, and the meticulous expectations of society. And women wore it willingly, or at least compliantly, understanding that the tightness of their waists was inseparable from their perceived elegance and social acceptance. You imagine the daily routine, waking in the dim morning light. The maid assisting in lacing and adjusting the garment, ensuring every bone and seam is aligned precisely, the subtle pressure becoming a constant companion throughout every action of the day. Even walking across polished floors requires measured steps, the tight structure holding your body in a rigid, upright posture that is both commanding and constraining. And sitting in the drawing room demands careful positioning to avoid disturbing the delicate balance of fabric, lace, and steel. And beyond mere physical strain, there is a psychological weight, the constant reminder that appearance must always take precedence over comfort, that the body itself is a canvas upon which societal ideals are inscribed, a daily negotiation between form and function, desire and duty. As you watch the skirts and bodices hanging in their precise arrangements, layered with petticoats and busks designed to shape the silhouette further, you understand that Victorian fashion was more than aesthetic. Was a mechanism of control, a system that molded both posture and identity, often at great personal cost. Every step, every breath, every gesture is subtly altered by the clothing itself, a testament to the remarkable lengths to which people of the era went to conform to societal ideals, often paying with discomfort, restricted movement, and even damage to their own bodies, all in the pursuit of a standard that, to modern eyes, seems almost unbearably rigid and painfully meticulous. And yet, the corset alone is only the beginning of the intricate web of constraints imposed by Victorian fashion. For once the tight lacing is secured, the rest of the ensemble conspires equally to dictate every movement and posture of the wearer. Layer upon layer of petticoats, often starched and weighted, envelop the legs in a thick, swishing cocoon of fabric that muffles sound but amplifies effort, each step requiring more exertion than the last, as the voluminous folds resist your movement. Over these rests the outer skirt, sometimes adorned with delicate lace, intricate embroidery, or heavy trimmings, all designed to display wealth and refinement, but equally capable of catching on door handles, splintered stair edges, or even the occasional candle flame, transforming a simple passage through the home into a cautious negotiation with potential disaster. And then there's the bustle, that rigid framework fastened at the back, intended to create the iconic silhouette of the era, but in practice forcing the wearer into an awkward sway, making sitting cumbersome and awkward, forcing each gesture to be measured and deliberate, and rendering the act of navigating the house through narrow hallways, up winding stairs, or across uneven cobblestones, both exhausting and fraught with peril. You can imagine the daily ordeal, a lady stepping carefully from room to room, feeling the weight of her skirts dragging against her ankles, the bustle forcing an unnatural arch in her posture, and the layers of fabric creating friction that chafes skin and gathers heat even in cool morning air, all while maintaining the delicate balance demanded by fashion and propriety. Every movement becomes calculated, from lifting the hem to descend stairs without tripping, to sitting at the breakfast table without crushing the framework of the bustle, to bending ever so slightly without revealing more than was considered appropriate. In a household already teeming with hazards from slick floors and open hearths to uneven stone steps and low-hanging beams, heavy, elaborate attire transforms the simplest daily activities into feats of precision, vigilance, and endurance. And the danger does not end with discomfort. Open flames from fireplaces and gas lamps, combined with skirts so expansive and layered, created a persistent risk of fire. A single misplaced flicker or sudden gust of air could ignite fabric that, due to its density and layers, would burn rapidly, leaving little time to react. Servants trained to anticipate the household's needs would constantly glance toward the lady of the house, prepared to intervene should a hem catch, a bustle snag, or a skirt brush too close to a flickering candle. Even leisure activities, like walking in the garden or attending social calls, carried the latent threat of both physical strain and accidental harm, a reality woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily life. And yet, despite the constriction, the heat, the effort, and the ever-present fire hazards, the clothing is celebrated as art, as social currency, and as a symbol of refinement. The wearer's body becomes both display and instrument, moving within the constraints of societal expectation, balancing elegance against endurance, grace against risk. And in this delicate negotiation, one sees not only the opulence of the Victorian world, but also its relentless demands, laden burdens, and the ways in which beauty itself exacted a tangible cost in sweat, breath, and constant awareness of the ever-present hazards around each step. And as you lift your skirts carefully to navigate the hallways, each step a cautious negotiation with the voluminous fabric around your ankles, your eyes inevitably fall upon the staircases, grand yet perilous, rising steeply to the upper floors with a combination of elegance and silent menace, their polished wooden steps glinting faintly in the flickering gaslight or candle glow, but revealing little of the danger inherent in every tread. Victorians, in their desire for architectural sophistication, often constructed staircases that are not merely functional but sweeping, adorned with balustrades carved in intricate patterns. Yet these same flourishes offer scant protection when one misjudges a step or loses balance under the weight of heavy skirts, layered petticoats, and rigid bustles. The corset further restricting the body's natural ability to recover from a stumble. You can almost feel the tension in your muscles as you descend, hand gripping the carved banister tightly, your mind calculating each movement, aware that a single misstep could send you tumbling in a cascade of fabric, wood, and porcelain that would have been impossible to stop mid-fall, and that accidents like these were far from rare in Victorian households, occurring with frustrating regularity even among the most careful residents. Lighting, too, conspires against safety. The soft, warm glow of candles and gas lamps, while romantic in appearance, casts shadows that distort depth perception, leaving the eye uncertain of each step and making even familiar staircases treacherous at the most routine hours of the day. Shadows stretch and shrink across each tread, the balustrade flickering between light and darkness. And every flicker of flame seems to exaggerate the height and depth of each step, exaggerating the risk of misjudgment and turning ordinary movement into a tense exercise in concentration. At night, when the household relies solely on these modest sources of illumination, corridors that appeared safe in daylight transform into mazes of uncertain edges and sudden drops, demanding full attention, unwavering focus, and the steady presence of mind that modern electric lighting so effortlessly provides. And yet, accidents were not confined to the staircases alone. Slippery floors, freshly polished, rugs unevenly placed, doors that swung with unpredictable force, and furniture arranged with an eye for formality rather than safety, all combined to create a household environment in which injury was an ever-present threat, lurking quietly beneath the polished surfaces and refined. You imagine the servants, trained to anticipate hazards and clear pathways. Yet, even they were not immune to slips, burns, and bruises, as they maneuvered trays of hot food, buckets of water, or coals from the fireplace across narrow corridors. For the residents themselves, the elegance of the home exacted a subtle cost. Every step demanded mindfulness, every movement measured to avoid embarrassment or injury, and the cumulative effect of these everyday hazards transformed the once grand domestic space into a minefield of hidden dangers. Each architectural feature, each design flourish, capable of causing harm to the unwary. It becomes clear as you pause at the landing to catch your breath and survey the ornate yet treacherous expanse around you, that the Victorian home, for all its beauty and refinement, demanded constant vigilance, patience, and dexterity, a delicate dance between elegance and peril, where every polished surface and sweeping staircase holds the memory of countless small accidents, and where the simple act of moving from one room to another could be fraught with tension, risk, and the quiet reminder that appearances, no matter how grand, often hide far more than they reveal. As you descend carefully to the kitchen, skirts lifted slightly to avoid brushing against the polished wood of the hallway, the air grows warmer, heavier with the scent of cooking fires and the lingering smoke of yesterday's coal. Yet, beneath these familiar domestic aromas lurks another, far subtler, more insidious presence, the unmistakable, almost imperceptible scurrying of rodents, mice and rats, drawn to the smell of grain, scraps, and food stored in the shadowed corners, make their homes among the kitchen floorboards. The cracks in the walls and the untended pantry shelves, their movements silent and deliberate. Yet, for anyone attuned to the sounds of the house, impossible to ignore completely. These creatures are not mere nuisances. They are carriers of disease, vectors for germs, and a constant reminder that even the most carefully maintained household cannot fully escape the natural instincts of survival that thrive in dark, hidden places. Yet, the Victorians, ever resourceful, devised a curious solution. Cats, maintained not as companions or playmates, but as essential instruments of pest control. You can almost see the tabby perched atop a high cupboard, amber eyes glinting in the dim gaslight, its body poised and tense, every muscle coiled for action at the faintest squeak or shuffle of tiny paws below. The cat's existence is utilitarian. It moves with a quiet grace that belies the deadly efficiency with which it patrols its domain. And in a household bustling with servants and family members, its presence is both a reassurance and a subtle warning that danger can arise in the smallest forms. You imagine the young maid carrying a basket of vegetables, glancing cautiously at the cat as it stretches languidly on the windowsill, knowing that the animal's interest is not merely curiosity, but duty, that its flick of tail or low guttural purr signals an ever-present awareness of threats invisible to human eyes. The juxtaposition is stark. A house filled with wealth, ornate furnishings, polished counters, and elegant dinnerware, yet teeming beneath its surface with a silent, shadowy world where survival is a constant negotiation, where rodents weave their quiet paths through cracks and crevices, and where the cats, creatures long domesticated for companionship, are repurposed as living, breathing weapons in the battle against disease and infestation. You can almost feel the tension in the air as the two worlds, the human and the animal, the domestic and the wild, intersect in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, each relying on the other for balance, order, and survival. And in the midst of this, you realize that the kitchen, the very heart of nourishment and sustenance, is also a theater of vigilance, where each movement, each step, each glance carries weight, where the servants work tirelessly, not only to prepare meals, but to navigate the labyrinth of hidden dangers, from slippery floors to the ever-present risk of bites or contamination, and where the family themselves, even when seated at the table or reaching for a fresh loaf of bread, must remain aware, however subconsciously, that their comfort and health are contingent upon the delicate balance maintained between feline guardians and rodent intruders, between careful labor and silent hazard. In this space, you sense the intricate choreography of domestic life, where survival, elegance, and vigilance are inseparably entwined, and where even the smallest, quietest creatures play roles of immense consequence, shaping the rhythms, routines, and the very safety of the household in ways that, to a modern observer, are both fascinating and quietly alarming. A vivid reminder that life in a Victorian home, for all its grandeur and refinement, was never free from the persistent presence of unseen, often underestimated dangers. Moving away from the bustling kitchen and the silent vigilance of the cats, your eyes wander across the rest of the house, tracing the contours of furniture polished to a gleaming perfection, delicate toys arranged with meticulous care, and books lined up along shelves in neat, orderly rows, each object seemingly innocent, each a testament to the taste, refinement, and careful curation of a Victorian household. Yet beneath the surface of this domestic splendor lies an invisible threat that could strike quietly, subtly, and with devastating consequences. The very materials that make up these cherished objects, vividly painted wooden chairs, intricately carved tables, children's playthings, and even the bindings of books often conceal toxic substances, from arsenic and lead to mercury compounds introduced for the sake of color, preservation, and durability, transforming everyday objects into potential hazards that could poison those who came into contact with them. You imagine reaching out to pick up a small porcelain doll, noting the intricate details of its painted features and the delicate fabric of its costume, unaware that the vibrant greens and blues intended to enchant and delight might be laced with shields, green, or Paris green arsenic-based pigments used to achieve that striking, luminous effect. Though visually enchanting, could slowly release toxic particles into the air, settle on hands, and be inadvertently ingested or absorbed, especially by children who are most vulnerable to such insidious exposure. Similarly, the polished furniture gleams under the sunlight streaming through the windows, yet the varnishes, finishes, and even the metal fittings may contain lead applied to provide luster and longevity, creating a persistent, invisible presence of poison in the very environment designed to signify comfort, stability, and refinement. Even books, those treasured vessels of knowledge and imagination, are not exempt. Bindings colored with toxic pigments, papers treated with chemical preservatives, and sometimes even mineral-based decorations on covers all contribute to an unseen hazard, quietly asserting itself on anyone who spends long hours turning pages. inhaling faintly powdery odors, or running fingers along gilded edges. You imagine the household children sitting cross-legged on thick carpets in a sunlit nursery, poring over colorful storybooks, entirely unaware that each bright illustration and decorative element carries within it a hidden danger, a silent reminder that the pursuit of beauty, education, and play in the Victorian era came often at an invisible cost. Walking through these rooms, the realization settles slowly and unsettlingly. Beauty, utility, and refinement in Victorian homes were inextricably entwined with danger, and every object, whether meant for work, play, study, or display, could be a source of harm, a quiet threat concealed beneath layers of paint, polish, or decorative flourish. The elegance of the surroundings, the richness of materials, and the artistry invested in each item created a home of wonder and sophistication. Yet simultaneously imposed on every resident a constant, largely invisible awareness that even the objects they trusted most might betray them, that every brush of the hand, every inhalation of dust, and every prolonged contact with color or texture carried with it the potential for harm, and that in this delicate balance between beauty and peril, the Victorian household reveals itself as a space where careful attention, constant vigilance, and an almost subconscious negotiation with unseen hazards were as essential to daily life as the performance of social rituals and domestic routines themselves, while the house itself conceals hidden dangers in every carefully curated object and piece of decor. It is in the daily labor of the servants where the true, relentless toll of Victorian domestic life becomes most evident, for behind every polished surface, every steaming kettle, in every carefully arranged breakfast lies the tireless, often perilous effort of those charged with maintaining the home's illusion of effortless perfection. The maids, cooks, and housekeepers of the era worked in conditions that modern sensibilities would find grueling and unforgiving, their bodies subjected to the cumulative strain of hauling buckets of scalding water up flights of stairs for washing, tending fires that never ceased, scrubbing floors and furniture with chemical compounds whose potency, while effective in achieving shine and sanitation, is corrosive to skin, eyes, and respiratory systems. Hands red and raw from constant contact with harsh soaps and abrasive powders, skin blistered from burns or chemical irritation, lungs irritated by coal smoke and the pungent fumes of cleaning agents. These servants moved to the house with a combination of practiced grace and silent endurance, performing each task as though the very elegance of the household depended on their resilience, which, in truth, it often did. You imagine the early morning routine, a maid kneeling on cold, hard floors to polish brass fixtures, the sting of scalding water rising in steam from the buckets beside her. Every motion repetitive, painstaking, yet executed with precision because any misstep might mar the illusion of the home's perfection or provoke the displeasure of its occupants. The coal that feeds the ever-burning fireplaces leaves streaks of soot on hands and clothing, particles inhaled unknowingly, slowly contributing to respiratory strain that, over time, could become chronic and debilitating. Hot embers from the hearth pose constant burn risks, while chemical residues from furniture polish, soap powders, and insecticides mingle in the air, creating a haze that both masks odors and carries invisible hazards, affecting those who spend hours each day immersed in their labor. In the kitchens, the intensity of work escalates, handling knives, lifting heavy pots of boiling water, stirring thick stews over open flames, and sweeping up debris that could conceal pests or sharp objects, all combine to create a daily environment where entry is not merely possible, but expected. And yet, the household runs with a precision that seems effortless to the observing family, hiding the physical and emotional strain endured by the staff. Even the smallest miscalculation, a slip on wet tiles, a misjudged step down a narrow stair, or a careless flick of hot water can result in burns, bruises, or worse. and the servants bear these risks silently, their well-being subordinated to the continuity of the household's image and the unspoken expectation that their labor should remain invisible, efficient, and uncomplaining. Walking through the house, observing both the wealth on display and the hidden mechanisms that sustain it, you begin to understand the stark contrast between the comfort of the family and the quiet suffering of those who maintain it, reality woven seamlessly into the daily operations of the home, where elegance, refinement, and order are inextricably tied to human toil, and where each pristine surface and fragrant room is both a triumph of domestic management and a testament to the endurance, resilience, and often overlooked suffering of those who made the household function. In this realization, the Victorian home becomes not only a place of aesthetic delight and social performance, but also a theater of hidden struggle, where the lives of the servants, marked by exposure to fire, chemicals, and physical strain, intersect with the lives of the family, creating a delicate, often hazardous equilibrium that defines the rhythms, dangers, and labor-intensive reality of daily life in this period, even beyond the immediate dangers posed by coal, scalding water, and harsh chemicals. The relentless rhythm of a Victorian household imposed its own quiet but unyielding torment, the sheer exhaustion born of unending, physically demanding labor that began long before dawn and often extended far beyond the dinner hour, leaving servants with bodies perpetually fatigued and minds numbed by the ceaseless repetition of tasks that, while essential to the smooth functioning of the home, allowed little room for rest, reflection, or relief. You can almost feel the weight settling into the shoulders of the housemaids as they rise in the pre-dawn darkness, moving silently across cold floorboards, their footsteps measured to avoid waking the family, while simultaneously recalling the dozens of chores awaiting them in rooms yet untouched by the lighting of fires. It's the hauling of water, the careful preparation of breakfast, and the polishing of surfaces so that every brass handle, every glass pane, every wooden banister gleams as if it had been fashioned that very morning, all while maintaining the composure, grace, and attentiveness expected in their roles. By mid-morning, exhaustion has become a constant companion, invisible yet inescapable, manifesting as aching backs from bending over heavy basins, sore wrists from scrubbing floors and furniture, and legs stiffened by hours of standing, walking, and climbing stairs. The mind weary from maintaining the relentless focus required to anticipate the needs of the household, correct minor mishaps before they escalate, and keep an ever-vigilant eye on the activities of other staff to ensure seamless coordination. Even breaks, if granted at all, are brief and often interrupted by urgent calls, minor emergencies, or the continuous churn of domestic operations, leaving little opportunity to recover or recharge. You imagine the kitchen staff, still bent over cauldrons and chopping boards, pausing only momentarily to catch a breath, sweat mixing with the lingering sense of smoke, flour, and simmering stews, knowing that in a single lapse of attention, injury, spillage, or delay could ripple through the household, disrupting the illusion of effortless elegance that the family expects. The day wears on. The accumulation of physical strain manifests subtly, at first heaviness in the limbs, stiffness in the back, a persistent dull ache in the shoulders, but gradually it becomes an omnipresent, insidious force coloring every motion and thought, reminding the servants that their lives are measured in duties rather than hours of rest, that every polished surface and perfectly laid table is the result of someone else's bodily endurance and mental vigilance. Even moments of relative quiet are tinged with fatigue, as the servants move through hallways with deliberate steps, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of objects, clothing, and children under their watchful care. And yet, every movement is tempered by the relentless awareness of what has been done, what remains, and how little respite awaits before the cycle begins again. It is here, in the quiet exhaustion that permeates the servant's daily existence, that one begins to understand the full human cost of a Victorian household-esque grandeur, the beauty of the home, the elegance of its furnishings, the comfort of its family, and the seamless performance of social rituals are all underwritten by the constant, physically demanding labor of individuals whose lives are consumed by the very mechanics that render their work invisible to those who benefit from it. And in this understanding, the grandeur of the house is revealed to be inseparable from the fatigue, strain, and quiet suffering of those who maintain it, painting a vivid portrait of endurance, resilience, and the unspoken price of domestic perfection in the Victorian era. After witnessing the relentless labor and the quiet, exhausting toil of the household staff, your attention inevitably turns to the very human vulnerability that permeates every corner of a Victorian home. The precarious state of health and the questionable remedies that both the wealthy and the working class relied upon is often at great risk. In this era, the line between treatment and danger is thin, a delicate and sometimes deadly dance. As families turn to the remedies of the opiate tonics, patent medicines, bizarre devices like electric belts, seeking relief from fatigue, illness, or simple discomfort, yet frequently ingesting or exposing themselves to substances whose long-term effects were poorly understood or entirely unknown. Imagine the parlor cabinet lined with bottles of elixirs, tinctures, and syrups, their labels promising vitality, calm nerves, or cure for ailments as common as sleeplessness or digestive distress, but containing opium, laudanum, or other narcotics that dulled pain and anxiety while quietly fostering dependence, confusion, and, in some cases, irreversible harm. Even the devices intended to heal or strengthen the body carry a sinister undertone. Electric belts, touted as a marvel of scientific innovation, designed to stimulate muscles, revive the internal organs, or invigorate the wearer with a gentle current, are strapped against the skin with the promise of restoration. Yet the unregulated currents and the lack of understanding of the human body's response turn these contraptions into instruments of potential injury, burns, or fainting, with the user blissfully unaware of the risks hidden behind the veneer of modernity and progress. You can almost envision a well-meaning mother or a maid, instructed by a physician's advice, fastening a belt around a weary relative's waist, adjusting it carefully, only to watch with unease as the subject shifts uncomfortably. Eyes fluttering, hands gripping the furniture, while the very technology meant to restore energy and health becomes an agent of discomfort and subtle damage. Sitting in the drawing room, you notice other remedies scattered across tables, powders and potions with exotic names, bottles of colored liquids promising to cleanse the blood or restore vigor, and mixtures that claim to alleviate ailments ranging from headaches to hysteria, yet composed of mercury, arsenic, or other toxic substances now known to cause long-term harm. The Victorians' earnest pursuit of wellness, informed by limited medical knowledge and a culture of experimentation, transforms ordinary domestic spaces into arenas where curiosity, desperation, and hope intersect, and where the very objects meant to protect or heal can just as easily threaten life and vitality. Even daily routines, such as simple bathing or washing, intersect with medical beliefs. Advice from physicians might dictate cold compresses, herbal poultices, or rigorous application of liniments, each with its own subtle hazards, often compounded by fatigue, exposure to cold rooms, or contaminated water. And in these moments, you begin to see the larger picture, a society striving for refinement and health, yet constrained by ignorance, incomplete understanding, and the seductive allure of novelty, where each domestic space, each remedy, and each intervention is both a testament to human ingenuity and a quiet reminder of the ever-present dangers that accompany life in the Victorian age. Walking through these rooms, imagining the careful administration of tonics, the faithful adherence to prescribed therapies, and the hopeful faces of those seeking relief, you gain a sobering appreciation for the fragility of human health in this era, and for the courage sometimes inadvertent that characterized daily life, where survival and comfort hinged not only on wealth and social position, but also on the ability to navigate a landscape of cures that were as mysterious and treacherous as the house itself, and where the very pursuit of well-being could, paradoxically, become a source of peril, even beyond the dangers posed by questionable medicines, patent tonics, and peculiar electrical devices. The Victorian household is haunted by a far more insidious threat: the pervasive ignorance surrounding hygiene and the causes of disease, a reality that transforms even the most refined, seemingly orderly homes into environments teeming with invisible hazards. In these grand residences, the very water that flows from taps or is stored in lit-lined cisterns may harbor contaminants, and the milk, meat, and produce that arrive from markets often travel long distances with little oversight, creating the perfect conditions for the spread of illness. Families, servants, and children alike go about their days largely unaware that their daily routines, touching furniture, handling food, or simply breathing, can expose them to bacteria, parasites, and pathogens that modern science would later reveal as the true culprits behind fever, dysentery, cholera, and other devastating diseases. Imagine a mother preparing breakfast for her children in a kitchen that gleams with polished surfaces, yet beneath the sheen lies a layer of dust, sweat, and microscopic contaminants imperceptible to the naked eye, waiting patiently on counters, cutting boards, and utensils for the slightest contact. Water for washing or cooking may be drawn from cisterns that have been exposed to dirt, debris, or lead leaching from the lining, and the Victorians, lacking the germ theory of disease, attribute sudden illness to bad air, miasmas, or moral weakness rather than to the invisible bacteria that modern medicine now identifies. You can picture the household children playing with toys that have been handled by multiple people, never sanitized, while pets like cats roam freely, chasing rodents, leaving traces of urine or fur that carry unseen pathogens. It's all contributing to a delicate ecosystem of risk that is entirely invisible to the household's occupants. Even cleaning, the labor-intensive task meant to promote hygiene, often fails to achieve its intended effect. Servants scrub floors with harsh chemicals, wash dishes in scalding water, and polish furniture with linseed oil or other caustic substances, Yet without knowledge of bacterial transmission, the household continues to harbor unseen microbes on surfaces, linens, and kitchenware. The air itself, thick with coal smoke, dust, and the odors of cooking and polish, carries particles that can exacerbate respiratory issues, while poor ventilation and dampness in basements, cellars, and sculleries allow mold and fungi to flourish, seeding headaches, fatigue, and chronic illness in those exposed daily. Walking through these rooms, serving the interplay between visible cleanliness and invisible danger, one cannot help but marvel at the paradox of Victorian domestic life, a culture obsessed with order, appearances, and propriety, yet fundamentally ignorant of the microbial forces that shape health and longevity. It's the careful attention to polishing, arranging, and decorating every corner of the home, while aesthetically impressive, does little to protect against the unseen world of pathogens, revealing a fragile equilibrium in which beauty and elegance coexist with peril, and where survival depends not on the perfection of appearances, but on luck, cautious habits, and the slow, incremental progress of science that has since transformed our understanding of hygiene, disease, and preventive care. In this context, every day in a Victorian household becomes an intricate dance of risk and routine. Hands washed, but not sterilized. Floors scrubbed, but still harboring invisible spores. Food prepared with care, yet vulnerable to contamination. Air thick with particulates from coal fires and cleaning agents, all conspiring to make illness an ever-present, largely unpredictable companion. And as you imagine the lives of those who inhabited these homes, from children to servants to the family themselves, the fragility of existence becomes clear. Survival required more than wealth or refinement. It demanded resilience, adaptability, and, often unknowingly, the hope that the invisible dangers lurking in every room would not claim another victim today. Stepping away from the unseen perils of disease and the exhausting demands of household labor, one cannot ignore the intricate web of social customs that govern daily life in a Victorian home. A world where every action, every movement, every appearance was meticulously orchestrated according to the unspoken rules of decorum, and where clothing served as both armor and signal, communicating status, propriety, and adherence to societal expectation with a precision that could be as suffocating as it was beautiful. From the moment a lady of the house stepped out of her bedroom, she was expected to be fully attired in garments appropriate to the hour, the activity, and the company she was to keep, transforming even the simplest morning stroll into a carefully choreographed performance in which the weight, volume, and intricacy of her costume conveyed not only elegance but obedience to a rigid cultural code. You can imagine her standing before the wardrobe, maids assisting with the lacing of corsets, the adjustment of petticoats, the placement of the bustle to achieve the proper silhouette, and the careful selection of walking costumes, layers upon layers of heavy skirts, starched blouses, and fitted jackets, complemented by gloves, hats adorned with feathers or ribbons, and sometimes parasols, not merely as fashion accessories, but as tools of protection against the sun and markers of refinement, each item bearing a meaning legible to those versed in the language of Victorian social codes. By mid-morning, even a casual excursion required more effort than most modern people would expend in a week, as the constraints of these garments restricted movement, compressed the torso, and created a rhythm of walking that was deliberately measured, deliberate, and highly formalized, transforming each step into an exercise in poise and discipline. The combination of corsets, layered petticoats, and heavily constructed skirts required the wearer to adapt her posture, control her breathing, and carefully navigate stairs, uneven cobblestones, or busy sidewalks. For a stumble or misstep could not only provoke embarrassment, could also draw unwelcome attention and jeopardize the carefully maintained social facade. It is easy to imagine the simultaneous pride and discomfort felt as the lady of the house stepped into the morning air, the swish of heavy skirts announcing her presence, the delicate balance of elegance and constraint dictating her every movement, and the awareness that even this brief walk was a testament to her ability to conform to the strictures of Victorian propriety. As the day progressed, clothing continued to serve as both obligation and ornament. Evening dresses awaited for social calls, dinners, or parlor gatherings, each ensemble demanding meticulous attention to detail-fitted bodices, delicate lace trims, jeweled accessories, and layers designed to create the appearance of slenderness and refinement, while often restricting breathing and freedom of movement. These garments were not merely personal choices, they were instruments through which society measured adherence to etiquette, social rank, and moral rectitude, signaling to friends, family, and neighbors alike that the wearer understood her place in the intricate hierarchy of Victorian life. The ritual of dressing became an endurance test, a daily negotiation between comfort and appearance, practicality and spectacle. The very act of clothing oneself was inseparable from performance, identity, and social expectation. In contemplating this, you begin to understand that the layers of clothing, the corsets, the petticoats, and the elaborately structured gowns were far more than mere fashions. They were physical manifestations of social order, cultural discipline, and aesthetic ideals, binding the wearer to an invisible set of rules that governed posture, behavior, and even breathing, and reminding us that in Victorian society, beauty, propriety, and survival were interwoven with discomfort, constraint, and a meticulous attention to the appearance of control. In this way, daily life, whether moving through the halls of a grand home or strolling along a garden path, becomes a performance of endurance, resilience, and conformity, where every stitch, seam, and embellishment carries meaning, and where the elegance of the outward appearance conceals both the physical strain it imposes and the broader, often invisible pressures of Victorian social life. Yet clothing was only one visible thread in the intricate tapestry of Victorian life, for behind every carefully arranged layer of fabric, behind every corset, bustle, or meticulously ironed blouse, existed a network of unspoken rules and strict social codes that dictated not only how one moved, dressed, or presented oneself, but also how every interaction unfolded within the household and beyond, where each gesture, tone of voice, and even the timing of a smile could communicate respect, rank, and moral propriety, or conversely, signal impropriety, ignorance, or social failure, with consequences that ranged from mild embarrassment to lasting damage to one's reputation. Daily routines were regimented with precision, beginning at dawn and punctuated by a series of rituals that might seem trivial or even excessive by modern standards. Yet, each action carried significance, whether it was the proper way to answer a servant's question, the correct posture while ascending a staircase, the exact manner in which one poured tea, or the timing and cadence of arrival for a social visit, all orchestrated to create the appearance of order, elegance, and self-discipline. Imagine a young lady navigating these expectations. Her mornings divided between private ablutions, assisted by servants, the meticulous dressing and layers of undergarments, petticoats, corsets, and outer gowns, followed by a carefully choreographed walk through drawing rooms where she greets family members and guests. Each bow, curtsy, and nod executed with practiced precision, every word measured for tone and propriety, and every glance calibrated to convey intelligence without arrogance, charm without impropriety. The servants, for their part, operated under a parallel system of rules, ensuring that fires were lit at the correct hour, tables set exactly to protocol, and rooms arranged according to expectations that had often been passed down for generations, while simultaneously managing the invisible hazards of the household dust, contaminated water, heavy furniture, and the lurking risks of open flames or steep staircases, without disturbing the delicate equilibrium of appearances that defined the household. Even simple social interactions, from receiving a visitor to presenting a child for inspection by a relative, were imbued with layers of expectation, requiring careful attention to posture, speech, and movement. A misstep, hurried curtsy, a misplaced comment, an improperly folded napkin could reverberate through the household, subtly signaling a lapse in propriety or awareness, and drawing corrective attention from both family and staff. Over time, this constant negotiation between formality and fatigue, performance and reality, wove itself into the fabric of daily life, shaping behaviors, attitudes, and even the rhythm of the day itself. As individuals learned to anticipate the needs of the household, the gaze of society, and the invisible markers of social acceptability that defined their existence. In this way, strict etiquette was both a guiding framework and a subtle form of control, transforming ordinary routines into performances of discipline and civility, where every action carried weight and where the beauty, order, elegance of the household were inseparable from the labor, vigilance, and social awareness required to maintain it. Walking through such a home begins to appreciate not only the outward sophistication and charm that defined Victorian society, but also the psychological demands it placed on those living within it, where survival, respectability, and even comfort were mediated through adherence to codes that touched every gesture, every word, and every moment of every day, leaving no room for casual spontaneity and underscoring how deeply social customs shaped not just appearances, but the very experience of life itself in this fascinating, treacherous era. As we navigate the elaborate routines, hidden hazards, and unyielding social codes of Victorian life, it becomes impossible not to pause and reflect on the stark contrast between their world and our modern comforts, countless innovations, protections, and conveniences that we often take for granted, now shield us from dangers that once lurked invisibly in every corner of a household. Today, The cold, drafty rooms of a Victorian home are unimaginable. Central heating ensures that even the harshest winter mornings are met with warmth and gentle, consistent air, and the oppressive chill that once filled bedrooms, parlors, and hallways is replaced by controlled climates that allow sleep, work, and leisure to proceed without the constant discomfort of frost-nipped fingers, or the shivering anticipation of lighting a fire for hours before the room is bearable. Similarly, water, once drawn from cisterns that might leach, lead, or harbor pathogens, now flows clean and safe from the tap, rigorously tested and treated to remove contamination, offering a level of hygiene and peace of mind that Victorian families could scarcely imagine, and eliminating a pervasive source of illness that transforms simple acts of drinking, bathing, or cooking into potential gambles with fate. Our medications, too, reflect this radical shift in safety and understanding. Whereas Victorian households relied on opiate tonics, arsenic-laden powders, and bizarre electrical devices, we benefit from rigorously regulated pharmaceuticals, carefully studied for efficacy and safety, administered under the guidance of trained professionals who understand the mechanisms of disease and the side effects of treatment, transforming healthcare from an arena of risk and uncertainty into one of predictable relief and recovery. Even the simple act of sleeping once endured atop lumpy mattresses of horsehair, straw, or feathers that jutted into your back unpredictably, now takes place on beds designed for ergonomic support and comfort, with memory foam, pocketed springs, or advanced fabrics that cradle the body and provide a consistent, restful surface night after night, free from the unpredictable pokes, lumps, and discomforts that marked every night in a Victorian household. And of course, electricity, ubiquitous in modern homes, eliminates the reliance on open flames, candles, and gaslighting, which were not only inconvenient but extraordinarily hazardous, capable of igniting fabrics, triggering house fires, and filling rooms with toxic fumes. The gentle flicker of LEDs, soft overhead lights, and climate-controlled appliances create an environment that is both functional and safe, eliminating the constant vigilance required in the past to navigate a house where light itself could be a threat. In combination, these modern comforts, heating, clean water, regulated medicines, safe electricity, supportive bedding, transformed daily life into something almost unrecognizable to a Victorian inhabitant. A world in which the invisible threats of toxicity, disease, fire, and exhaustion have been mitigated, allowing people to focus on living fully rather than constantly negotiating the hazards hidden behind elegance, tradition, and fashion. Reflecting on these differences, it becomes clear that while the Victorian era is often romanticized for its ornate interiors, meticulous manners, and aesthetic refinement, it was also a world of constant, quiet peril, where survival required awareness, resilience, and adherence to rigorous routines. Modern life, with all its conveniences and safeguards, offers not only comfort, but a freedom that they could scarcely imagine, the freedom to move, breathe, sleep, and exist with a confidence that the very environment of your home will not betray your health, safety, or well-being, a privilege made possible through centuries of scientific discovery, social reform, and the relentless pursuit of understanding the forces that shape human life. The comforts we often take for granted today, warm rooms, clean water, safe medicines, reliable lighting, and comfortable bedding, did not appear by chance, nor were they the simple result of human ingenuity alone. Rather, they are the culmination of centuries of painstaking progress, painstaking observation, and a gradual, sometimes painfully slow, confrontation with the consequences of ignorance and negligence. Victorian households, for all their elegance and ornamentation, existed in an era where beauty and hazard were inseparable, and it was only through the persistent efforts of public health pioneers, the painstaking work of scientists, and the imposition of regulatory frameworks that society gradually began to pull back the curtain on the invisible dangers that had long haunted daily life. Public health reforms, ranging from the creation of clean water systems, proper sewage treatment, and waste management to the regulation of food quality and the enforcement of safer building standards merged not from convenience, but from necessity, spurred by epidemics of cholera, typhoid, and other deadly diseases that swept through cities and towns, leaving vivid reminders of the costs of ignorance, inaction, and unchecked hazards in their wake. Science, too, played a transformative role. As researchers and physicians painstakingly unraveled the causes of illness, identified the microbes responsible for disease, and developed methods to sterilize water, food, and medical instruments, creating a foundation for the modern understanding of hygiene, medicine, and disease prevention. These discoveries gradually reshaped daily life, transforming kitchens, bedrooms, bathrooms from spaces teeming with invisible threats into environments designed to protect the health of families and workers alike, in turning practices that were once dangerous or merely aesthetic into routines informed by knowledge, logic, and foresight. The toxic wallpapers, lead-lined cisterns, coal-laden air, and unsafe medications of the Victorian household were gradually displaced by safer alternatives. In each new standard law or public health initiative, whether regulating the chemicals used in homes, controlling the quality of medicines, or enforcing fire safety in buildings, represented a hard-won victory in humanity's ongoing effort to make life both beautiful and survivable. Even beyond the physical reforms, these advancements carried a profound social impact, reshaping the relationship between individuals and their environment. Wealth and status no longer offered immunity from illness or accident. Rather, scientific knowledge, civic responsibility, and regulatory oversight became essential tools for survival, empowering people to inhabit their homes without the constant, invisible specter of danger that had shadowed Victorian life. In this sense, every modern convenience, from the warm air flowing through a radiator to the crisp, uncontaminated water filling a glass, from a tested and verified medicine to a mattress designed to support and protect, presents not just comfort, but the legacy of countless individuals who challenged ignorance, documented dangers, and advocated for change, ultimately transforming society and daily life in ways that were once unimaginable. Reflecting on these transformations, it becomes clear that the charm and elegance of Victorian homes, while captivating to the imagination, concealed a world fraught with peril. A world in which beauty, decorum, and routine were intertwined with invisible hazards that could strike without warning, and that the safety, health, and comfort we now enjoy are neither trivial nor inevitable, but the result of deliberate, thoughtful, and often courageous efforts to confront danger with knowledge, to transform risk into security, and to ensure that daily life could be lived with dignity, pleasure, and confidence. It is this hard-won balance between aesthetic richness and protective science that allows us to inhabit homes, move freely, and experience comfort without the constant vigilance demanded of our Victorian predecessors. A reminder that every convenience we enjoy is a legacy of progress, curiosity, and persistent human endeavor. When you step back and take in the grand sweep of a Victorian household, the towering ceilings, the polished woodwork that gleams softly in candlelight, the intricate moldings, the sumptuous fabrics, and the rich, ornate furnishings that seem to speak of refinement and affluence, you might be tempted to imagine a world of pure elegance, comfort, and security. A sanctuary of wealth and taste, carefully curated to delight the senses and impress the eyes. Yet, beneath this gilded surface, beneath the shimmering wallpapers, the velvet drapes, and the meticulously arranged furniture, lurked a host of hidden dangers so pervasive and insidious that they could strike at the unwary at any moment, quietly undermining health, comfort, and even life itself. Every corner of these homes, every carefully polished surface, every luxurious item of decoration concealed hazards that were invisible to the casual observer. Walls that gleamed with arsenic-laced wallpaper, pipes and cisterns that silently lead into water, fireplaces and gas lamps that filled rooms with toxic fumes and presented fire risks, lumpy mattresses stuffed with horsehair or straw that could harbor pests, and kitchens and sculleries teeming with mold, fungi, and rodents, each posing a threat to the household in ways both subtle and deadly. The elegance of the home was a masterful illusion, a stage set in which beauty and danger performed a delicate, uneasy dance, where appearances often betrayed reality, and where the very trappings of wealth and sophistication ornate wallpaper, curative books, elaborate toys, and even seemingly innocuous furniture might harbor toxins that no eye could detect, and no sense could fully discern until their effects began to take hold. Within these walls, even the daily routines of the most privileged occupants required vigilance, endurance, and constant awareness for a misplaced step on a steep staircase. A spark from a candle or a breath of contaminated air could transform ordinary life into a perilous experience, a silent reminder that comfort and danger were never far apart in a world that prized elegance above safety. In this sense, Victorian homes were as much lessons in survival as they were demonstrations of aesthetic achievement. They embodied a paradox in which meticulous care for outward appearances coexisted with an almost complete ignorance of the invisible threats that surrounded the inhabitants. The very refinement that made these homes appear safe and inviting, the layers of clothing, the intricate furniture, the polished surfaces, the attentive servant, so concealed hazards that modern sensibilities recognize immediately, but that those living in the era could barely perceive, relying on habit, etiquette, and hope to navigate a world filled with unseen killers. And yet, it is precisely this juxtaposition that makes the study of Victorian domestic life so fascinating. A world of sophistication and charm that simultaneously demanded endurance, resilience, and vigilance, reminding us that history is rarely as comfortable or straightforward as it appears in portraits, carefully staged interiors. Understanding this duality, the elegance and the peril, the visible beauty and the invisible threats, force us a vivid insight into the lived experience of the past. A reminder that behind every ornate chair, every gleaming floor, and every lavishly dressed lady or gentleman, there existed a reality far less forgiving, a reality where survival depended not merely on wealth, taste, or social standing, but on the constant negotiation with dangers that were often hidden, silent, and lethal, transforming the very concept of a home from a sanctuary into a carefully managed battleground between comfort and risk, aesthetics and reality, appearances and the often harsh truths of daily life in the Victorian era. Yet, for all the hidden hazards and constant vigilance demanded by a Victorian household, there was an undeniable, almost hypnotic charm that lingered in the measured cadence of life. It's the careful choreography of daily routines and the meticulous attention to aesthetics that permeated every corner of the home, giving even the most perilous surroundings a sense of purpose and beauty that is difficult to capture in modern terms. In this world, danger and elegance were intertwined, creating an environment where the slow unfolding of the day, from the early morning lighting of fires and the careful arrangement of breakfast tables, to the deliberate rituals of dressing and social interaction, and the quiet, structured leisure of afternoons spent reading, needlework, or strolling in geometrically arranged gardens, afford a rhythm, a predictability, and a depth of experience that is largely absent from the hurried pace and constant connectivity of contemporary life. There was a pleasure in order, in knowing precisely what each hour demanded, in being able to anticipate the next action, the next step, the next visitor, and to navigate it all with grace, awareness, and the satisfaction of mastery, however constrained or difficult that mastery may have been. The beauty of the home, the warm glow of candlelight flickering across polished wood, the harmonious symmetry of furniture and decor, the rich textures of fabrics, the carefully cultivated gardens beyond the windows offered a visual and sensory richness that compensated, as part, for the ever-present risks, transforming daily life into a lived aesthetic, where every action, gesture, and interaction became a small performance within a carefully designed theater of domestic elegance. The slower pace of life allowed for reflection, for attention to detail, and for a kind of immersion in the present moment that is rare in a world dominated by instant communication, constant noise, and the relentless pressure to multitask. Even as one navigated the hidden dangers, arsenic and wallpaper, lumpy mattresses, hazardous stoves, and gas lamps, or the back-breaking labor of servants, there was a comfort in the ritual itself, in the repetition, the predictability, and the clarity of roles and responsibilities that structured every day with precision and intention. Moreover, there was a certain social satisfaction, a sense of belonging and accomplishment derived from adherence to etiquette, from successfully negotiating complex social expectations, and from participating in the rituals that marked one as competent, refined, and respectable in the eyes of family, peers, and community. This charm was not superficial. It was deeply experiential, rooted in the tangible sensations of texture, scent, light, sound, and movement, in the satisfaction of mastering a complicated routine, and in the psychological reassurance that, despite the ever-present dangers, one was inhabiting a world of order, taste, and controlled beauty, a world in which form and function, elegance and risk, hazard and pleasure existed side by side, inseparably woven into the fabric of daily life. In appreciating this balance, the simultaneous peril and beauty, the risk and refinement, we begin to understand why so many look back at Victorian life with a mixture of fascination, admiration, and disbelief, recognizing that the allure of the past is inseparable from its challenges, and that charm, in its deepest sense, often exists precisely where adversity, discipline, and attention converge, revealing a world that was at once perilous, intricate, and profoundly human in its rhythms, aesthetics, and demands. As we leave behind the flickering candlelight and the intricate but perilous routines of Victorian households, it becomes strikingly clear how profoundly modern comforts illuminate the progress humanity has made in safeguarding health, safety, and well-being, transforming what was once a constant negotiation with invisible threats into a life characterized by ease, predictability, and genuine security. Every small convenience we now take for granted, the gentle hum of central heating, maintaining a consistent, cozy temperature, the steady flow of clean, treated water from taps that are rigorously tested for purity, the soft, yet supportive mattresses that cradle our bodies through the night, the filtered and regulated foods and beverages that nourish without hidden toxins, and the safe, reliable electricity that powers lights, appliances, and communications serves as a daily testament to centuries of scientific discovery, public health reforms, and social advocacy that painstakingly replaced hazard with protection, uncertainty with confidence, and fear with comfort. In experiencing the relative simplicity of our modern homes, it becomes almost impossible not to marvel at the invisible scaffolding of knowledge, experimentation, and regulation that underpins every ordinary morning, every routine task, and every moment of repose, shielding us from dangers that Victorian families lived with as an accepted part of existence. This progress is not merely technological. It reflects a profound shift in societal values, a collective recognition that human life, health, and comfort are worth deliberate investment, planning, and oversight. Where once wallpaper could conceal arsenic, cisterns could silently poison, mattresses could harbor pests, and kitchens could be breeding grounds for toxic molds. Today, rigorous standards, inspections, and scientific understanding ensure that homes are not treacherous arenas, but safe havens, environments designed to sustain life rather than threaten it, offering a peace of mind that would have been unimaginable even to the wealthiest Victorians. Modern medicines, carefully tested and regulated, replace opiate tonics and electrified belts. Clean water and proper sewage systems eradicate cholera and typhoid outbreaks that once shaped entire cities. Fire-safe lighting and building codes prevent catastrophes that were previously a daily concern. Every seemingly mundane convenience, turning a faucet, adjusting a thermostat, plugging in a lamp, represents the culmination of centuries of incremental but transformative progress. Each measure a safeguard that allows life to proceed without the constant vigilance that Victorian households demanded. Spedding. Reflecting on this contrast, the elegance of the past takes on a new, nuanced dimension. It is simultaneously admirable for its artistry, ambition, and devotion to social ritual, yet starkly perilous when viewed through the lens of human survival and well-being. Modern life, with all its conveniences, comforts, and protections, invites us to recognize not only what we enjoy, but how much we owe to those who fought ignorance with knowledge, hazard with regulation, and danger with design. It's creating a society where elegance and safety, beauty and health, pleasure and protection are no longer mutually exclusive, but coexisting features of daily life. In this light, every warm room, every safe meal, every comfortable bed, and every functional appliance is more than just a convenience. It is a legacy, a triumph over centuries of hidden hazards. A reminder that the world we inhabit today is not only more comfortable, but profoundly more secure. It's allowing us to live fully, move freely, and sleep soundly in a way that those living behind the ornate walls of Victorian homes could scarcely imagine. As we finally draw back from the dim, flickering candlelight of Victorian bedrooms, it becomes impossible not to marvel at the strange juxtaposition of elegance and danger that defined every corner of these historic homes. The rooms, cloaked in shadows and chilled by the absence of electric lights, offered little comfort to those who awoke to their heavy, lumpy mattresses stuffed with horsehair, straw, or feathers, each roll and dip pressing against the body in ways that modern memory foam could scarcely replicate. The air itself was laden with the lingering sense of coal smoke from unlit fireplaces, the acrid temps of wood smoke from previous nights, and the faint, pervasive aroma of furniture polish and linseed oil, creating a heavy, almost tangible atmosphere that reminded every occupant that beauty was often inseparable from discomfort, that elegance demanded endurance, and that life in such a house was a daily negotiation with the invisible and the unavoidable. Morning routines, which might seem simple today, were elaborate rituals requiring both the cooperation of attentive servants and a willingness to endure physical inconvenience. Maids moved quietly but purposefully through the halls, lighting fires and carrying steaming buckets of water up flights of stairs, preparing washing basins in the hopes of providing some semblance of cleanliness. Baths were labor-intensive affairs, requiring coordination, time, and the constant presence of attendants, leaving little room for privacy or comfort. Every aspect of daily life, from washing and dressing to eating and walking in the gardens, relied directly on the labor of those who toiled behind the scenes, whose backs ached from lifting and hauling, whose hands bore burns and chapping from harsh soaps and chemical cleaning agents, and whose lungs carried the constant burden of dust, coal, and fumes, all in service to maintaining the order, beauty, and social expectations of the household. And yet, it was not merely labor that defined the dangers of the Victorian home. Toxicity lurked in every decorative choice, from the brilliant green arsenic-laced wallpaper, known as shields or Paris green, to the lead paint on walls, furniture, and toys, to the gas lighting that flickered beautifully but released unseen hazards into the air, to the lead-lined cisterns silently contaminating drinking water. Mold and fungi thrived in damp cellars and sculleries, multiplying unseen as they filled rooms with spores that could sicken the unwary, and even books, mineral specimens, and seemingly innocent household objects contained toxic elements that would horrify a modern observer. Navigating the home required constant vigilance. Steep staircases demanded careful steps in the dim glow of candles. Cats prowled kitchens, not as companions, but as pest controllers, and rodents still found ways to infiltrate, reminding every household member that danger was omnipresent, no matter how polished or orderly the surroundings appeared. The clothing of the era, while visually stunning, added further strain and hazard. Corsets, compressed ribs and internal organs, heavy skirts, petticoats, and bustles restricted movement, created awkward leverage, and could even catch fire if one got too close to an open flame. Social expectations reinforced these dangers. Elaborate clothing, strict etiquette, and the careful performance of daily routines governed every gesture, dictating how individuals moved, spoke, and even breathed within these constrained yet beautifully designed spaces. Even medical understanding lagged painfully behind, with the widespread use of opiate tonics, electrically charged cures, and minimal knowledge of hygiene and disease compounding the constant hazards of home life. Yet, despite all of these perils, there was an undeniable charm in the order, in the deliberate pace, and in the elegance that filled every corner of a Victorian home. There was comfort, in its own peculiar way, in the rhythm of the day, in the attention to detail, in the immersive aesthetic experience of a house where every object, color, and texture had meaning and purpose. It was a world where beauty demanded respect, where danger invited caution, and where living fully required awareness, endurance, and an appreciation for the careful choreography of life. Comparing this to our modern comforts brings both relief and reflection. Today, central heating warms our rooms effortlessly, filtered and safe water flows at the turn of a tap. Beds are soft, supportive, and free from pests, and electricity illuminates every corner without releasing toxic fumes. Medicines are tested and regulated. Building codes and public health reforms have mitigated hazards, and knowledge about hygiene, disease, and safety allows us to inhabit homes that are simultaneously beautiful, functional, and secure. These advancements are not accidental. They are the legacy of centuries of observation, innovation, and reform, transforming the domestic environment from a place of constant negotiation with invisible dangers into a space of protection, comfort, and genuine well-being. So, as we leave behind the ornate yet perilous corridors, the heavy skirts, the lumpy mattresses, the smoky air, and the invisible toxins, we can appreciate not only the aesthetic richness of Victorian life, but also the incredible progress humanity has made in safety, health, and comfort. So the charm of the past is undeniable, but so is the comfort of the present, reminder to value every warm room, every clean glass of water, every regulated medicine, and every quiet night of undisturbed sleep. Good night, and may your dreams tonight be as safe, warm, and peaceful as a modern bedroom, free from the hidden dangers that once haunted elegant homes of the past.